Cindy Crane here from Miniature Luxuries and Papers. I've got an awful lot to show you today, so I thought I would just take you to the warehouse and show you the whole collection. I found to picture this in January when I was in Frankfurt, and I absolutely fell in love with the whole concept. These are great drawings, quintessentially British, English, with the cottages and the buildings and the stores. All the beach scenes are great. Now everything is made in England. They even have sentiments, and for all of the stamps they have little additions. They have trees and people, cars, and you can even insert different windows into the buildings just by masking, and I'll show you some of that in a bit. And these are the two stamps we're going to use today. The Ferris wheel and the Roxy are just really fabulous. It's kind of like a Brighton beach. So let's get started. So let's talk about some of the basics. The first thing I do when I get a new stamp is I just make a copy on a piece of paper. And make sure it's more like copy paper, because when you do the masking, you don't want too much height. And then what I do is just fussy cut around. And my favorite thing to do is to use a zig pen or the tack it over and over. And I put it on the back of it, let it dry, and then you've made your own sticky note. And then I just store it in my binder so it's ready to use. Okay, now for your supplies. And this is the time when you go through your stash and you find your favorite markers or pencils. Anything you haven't used in a while, just bring them out and then you can try them out on these stamps. For inks, I like to use Memento or Color Box. And it's important that you keep in mind that it's got to be a permanent ink so that you don't have any bleed when you start to color. You're going to need a pencil and an eraser, and this helps with your layout so that you can get your baseline and also mark in where your stamps are going to go before you start stamping. Now, I like to use the micron pens. I get them in different sizes because once you stamp, you may want to go back over some lines or add some detail, or actually in this case, on this stamp, you'll see that it ends, and there isn't a fine line telling you where the end of the stamp is. So you're going to want to draw that in, and if you have another stamp up against it, this is when you can add the detail. Now, for markers, I've used them all. I've got the Tri-Blend, Tombow, watercolor pencils, watercolor brushes, regular Spectrum, and some Copic. So I say use whatever you like. Now, that's important when you come to which paper to use. Now, I've actually used, this is digital copy paper from Hewlett-Packard. It's a cardstock, and this seems to work very well for markers. I've also used the Strathmore mixed media pads. And for the watercolor, I've used the Aqua Spectrum Noir, and also used the regular watercolor paper. And I like it in the large pad because then when you're doing your layouts, you can make them any size you like. So that's the basics on your supplies. Now, the other thing is whether or not you're going to use a stamp platform. I prefer to do that. Now, when I'm doing the larger layouts, I had a problem with the other ones because they had a stopper, as you say, on either side. So I found this one, and this is from Couture Creations. So what happens here is when I have a longer layout, all I have to do is just put it in and then move it along when I'm stamping. So that helps a lot. Now, if you don't have this one, and you have, say, the stamp platform, I had a problem because, as I say, it's got the lip on it. So what I did is I simply took a mouse pad, and it's thick enough that when you lay it in here, it takes up that space and it allows you to run your page all the way across. And if you're using a heavier stock, it doesn't affect it at all. You won't have a crease or a bend in it. So this is something to keep in mind. Now, next we're going to start planning our layout. And a little bit of planning goes a long way when you're doing these projects. If you're going to put it in a frame, make sure you measure your dimension on the inside, and then you can draw a little outside line so you can keep your image right in where it belongs. On the beach huts, I did the same thing. I knew I wanted to frame it, so I started with just a pencil guide before I did my layout. Okay, so let's get started. For today, I'm going to use the Bella Villa and the Sibling Terrace. These are two of my favorites. Now we're going to start, take the pencil, and let's just draw in a horizon line or a baseline. This will give you a good starting point. Now, I know I want them to be stacked, so this is where your masks will come in handy too, doing your layout. Now, I know I want this one in the foreground, so we'll just place it there. And the Sibling Terrace, I want it to look like a city scene, so I'm going to place this one to the back. Now you have to remember too, when you're dealing with things from front to back, you want to make sure you get your four objects to look like they are larger. So you don't want this up too high. You want it just peeking out from behind. So once you get that where you'd like it, straighten that out a little bit. And see, when your other objects come into play, you want to make sure that they're not overlapping. This just takes a little bit of playtime, and that's all right. That's part of the fun of doing this. And I actually think I want that just a little bit lower. And watch out for that window. Okay. That looks just about right. Now, also, too, I was telling you that you can add to these drawings. And where the building ends here, you can actually draw in another building. And it's very easy to do. So I may want to go ahead and extend this out once I get everything stamped in. So what I want to do then is just put a little pencil mark there and draw in some guidelines where the stamps are going to go. And then you know for placement when you're getting ready to stamp. Okay, now I'm going to speed up the next part to do the stamping so that you don't have to stand there and watch me painfully line them up. So just take a look and see how I've done it, and then we'll be right back. Okay, let's get started. I've got my stamp platform set up, and I like to use the 𝐂𝐨𝐧𝐧𝐞 sheets, the little adhesive sheets, especially when you're using a large stamp, because it'll help keep it in place. I'm going to place my paper in, position my magnets. And one other thing, sometimes with the large stamps, when you lift up, it kind of sticks depending on what surface you're using. So I just take a little bit of baby powder and just rub it over the surface. Just with a light cloth, just rub off the excess. Now, going to take our stamp and position it on our pencil lines. And ink up. And there's one little spot here, but you can also just add a little bit of ink. Don't over ink, because then it kind of destroys the detail. Okay, that looks pretty good. Make sure it's lined up. Okay, now place your mask. Okay. Then we're going to position the other stamp that you had marked. See, we're getting a little stick, and it's a good thing we had the powder. Just put a little powder on this. Now at this point, if you need it's not stamping properly, just take a little scrap of paper. You can add a shim. Be careful when you're sliding it in, since you've got the sticky there. That looks pretty good. Okay. And there you have it. Okay, now's the time to make any adjustments, and then we're going to add the rest of the buildings. As I showed you, it kind of cut off there, so now you can make your own however you'd like. The other thing too is I made a copy of the background stamp so I can double check the details, and if I want to draw anything in, I use this as a guide. Now I've selected a pen that matches the line width and just start drawing. Well, here we are, and now you're ready for color. Let me show you one that I've done previously to give you an idea of what you can do with the drawing and fitting the pieces together. This will give you a much better idea. This was one stamp, And then this was another, and I added a little piece of the building behind here. And this whole section right here, I drew in. So you really can't tell. This wharf scene, this light post and the fence, this was one stamp. Now the boats, obviously now I did these to come to the forefront. So I did the masking, but this whole bridge, I drew in. This whole arch and the clouds, I drew in with pen and ink. You can add the water. So really, once you take a look at the stamps and see how they're drawn, you can modify them any way you like. And that's part of the creativity. This is why you're not stuck with this is the stamp and this is the way you have to do it. Well, in the interest of time, I just went ahead and colored in my stamped image. But I wanted to show you something now, because here you are with a beautiful scene, but what do you do with the background? Now, I used markers for the buildings, but when I went to do the background, sometimes it's hard with markers, you know, it leaves stroke marks and everything, but I just wanted to give it a nice glow. So what I did, and here's one that I stamped previously, I just went back in and I took my masks, placed them back down, and then I took some distress ink and a brush, and then just lightly started building up the skyline. The only thing you'll have to remember here, and I didn't do it, is when you draw in additional buildings, you want to make sure to mask that off. And there's no reason why you can't combine mediums. You can combine your markers with watercolor pencils or anything else. So just go on over. And then when you lift it off, you have a real nice shaded background. I think that looks pretty good. And now I'd like to show you a few projects in the works. These are the Noblins. This is a new stamp, and I absolutely love the way these look. These are all going to be cards. They're, as I say, in the works. But depending on how you color them, they could be for an everyday or a Christmas. Now, don't be limited by the color palette. You don't have to make everything realistic. This was a purple day, and that's the Fisherman's Wharf. The greenhouse is just really fun to do. I added the trees, the left and the right trees, and then just drew in some additional plants. Now this one shows you what you can do with just one stamp. This is the same stamp, just repeated and colored differently. And it's the one that we used on today's sample. This is the ghost house. Now, I made this as a spring scene with a tree, but just imagine doing this in grays and blacks. And you can also make this a Christmas house. All you'd have to do is mask out, and you could insert a little wreath there on the door. This is a new stamp, the Christmas presents. So I colored them in different colors. So you can make them for all occasions. There's a lot of possibilities with these stamps. Before we go, Picture This was really excited that I was going to be doing this demo today, so they've given me special permission to print coloring cards for you. So for every purchase of a Picture This stamp, you'll receive 4 coloring cards. And these are a limited edition, and I hope you enjoy them. I want to thank you for being here today. I hope you learned something, and I really enjoyed showing you all the Picture This. Hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.